It doesn't interest me. It doesn't draw me in. I mean, I don't mind watching things about politics and the news. It's just I'm not really drawn to them because it's not really something to do with me. None of my friends that I know of are interested in politics. I have my own opinion on anything, but if the news shows it, it's reliable.
Just because a young person doesn't vote, it doesn't mean they're not interested. It may be that it's a case of willful non-participation. It's interesting how we measure apathy. A lot of commentators measure it just purely by voting. So young people aren't interested in politics because they don't vote as much.
I've got the least opportunity than previous generations have had. You know, things are being taken away from them and being made priced out of their range, and they have every right to complain. We know that lots of young people are engaged with things like pressure groups or trade unions. The myth that young people 18 to 24-year-olds are not interested in politics has been slightly burst, and it's been smashed with recent events over tuition fees in December 2010, the protests that we saw across London. And the coalition government and pushing, going to abolish the EMA and pushing up fees for university courses, it's radicalised a whole layer of young people for the first time. You know, it's always the young what change the world, and you know, you can go back to periods of time like May '68 when the student protests, not just in Paris but you know throughout the world against the Vietnam War.
This was led by a very strong youth movement. In history, a lot of movements, a lot of political movements have been bolstered by young people and youth because they're often seen as a symbol of idealism and progressiveness and the future. So I'm not always convinced when commentators tell me or people tell me that young people are not interested. Of course, you'll meet people who aren't interested, but I think for every person you speak to that isn't engaged, at least consciously, then I can show you someone that is engaged.
Until recently, there did seem to be general apathy when it comes to politics amongst young people, which I found particularly frustrating.
It always amuses me when you see on TV or you see news reporters saying, you know, this is terrible violence and we don't understand it, there's no need for this. But they also dismiss, they're not also discussing the wider issue that, remember, some political groups fully endorse violence and they see it as a legitimate political strategy. You know, ITN or BBC would have you believe that this is all terrible and that these groups should be part of the political debate, but as far as studying a syllabus is concerned, of course, that is part of the debate.
Conspiracies where, you know, the CIA and Kissinger in the 70s conspire to overturn democratically elected government in Chile. Yes, there is that history of conspiracy to bring down people. You know, and the American state, or should I say, secret services, have certainly been part of that in the past.
The evidence provided to us can be sketchy, can be contradictory, can be coincidental, but at the same time, I think conspiracy theorists often rely on a big leap of faith, where that leap of faith, there isn't as much evidence. It's not always documented. It's based on threading a number of links together that don't always hang together necessarily well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there isn't abuses of power or corruptions of power and hierarchies battling against each other behind the facade of an established government. Some of the media that they're consuming will have bias and will have a certain political slant. I mean, we're not saying to people don't watch certain media, but be aware that there might be a bias and there might be a slant on what is being fed to you.
There's a famous revolutionary who said that you can ignore politics, but politics will not ignore you.